Have you woke up checking social networks and felt that tightness on your chest when you see the achievements of others? Have you been measuring your value by the success of others, as if life was a competition where you are always losing? At age 30 or more, this comparison paralysis becomes even more cruel, because time seems to drain between fingers while you remain immobile, observing the lives of others instead of living your own. There is something deeply disturbing in the way our society has transformed human existence into a showcase of achievements. We are no longer living our lives. We are performing edited versions of ourselves, always measuring our value by the external approvals thermometer. And in this constant performance, we lost contact with what Viktor Frankl called our more fundamental responsibility: the search for meaning. Comparison is not just a modern social habit. It is a form of existential escape. When we get lost in the achievements of others, we avoid the most difficult and necessary task of our existence: to find out what really matters to us. It is easier to measure our life by the ruler of others than to find our own measure of meaning. Imagine for a moment the following situation. You are at a party, surrounded by colleagues of the same age. Someone announces a promotion, another talks about the new house, a third person shows photos of the international trip, and you smile, congratulate, but inside you feel that familiar feeling of inadequacy. As if he was late for a race he didn't even know he was playing. This sensation is not accidental. It reveals something deep about our modern existential condition. We lose our ability to inhabit our own lives because we are constantly running away from it through comparison. And this escape has a high price: the paralysis of meaning. Frankl noted that humans can withstand almost any suffering as long as they find meaning in it. But the constant comparison steals us exactly the possibility of finding meaning on our own journey. When we measure our lives for the lives of others, we are essentially saying that our existence has value only if it is higher than the others. And this is a subtle but devastating way to deny our own existential dignity. Comparison paralysis acts as a slow poison. It does not kill at once, but it undergoes our ability to make authentic decisions. Have you noticed how hard it is to choose a path when you are constantly looking at the paths of others? It is impossible to discover our unique vocation when we are obsessed with the vocations of others. At 30, this paralysis becomes particularly cruel because it coincides with a period when we naturally question our choices. It is the age when many feel the real weight of responsibility for their lives for the first time. And it is also when the differences between the chosen paths become more visible. Some married, others remain single. Some have built solid careers, others are still seeking direction. And in this diversity of destinations, the comparison finds fertile ground to grow. But there is something that the constant comparison prevents us from seeing. Each life carries its own invisible challenges. The person you envy for your apparent stability may be fighting a silent depression. The colleague who seems to have everything solved may be facing a marriage crisis. The friend who travels the whole world may be running away from an inner void that cannot fill. Logotherapy teaches us that meaning cannot be given from the outside in. He needs to be discovered by each person in his own experience. And this discovery is only possible when we stop seeking external validation and start listening to our inner voice. When we stop measuring our lives by the achievements of others and start asking, what is this existence asking me? This question changes everything. It takes us from the position of passive spectators of the lives of others and puts us as active protagonists of our own history. Because meaning is not in comparisons, but in the responsibility we assume before our own existence. There is a fundamental difference between envy and inspiration. Envy paralyzes, inspiration moves. When we look at someone and feel jealous, we are essentially saying, I want what you have, but I don't want to do what you did to have. Inspiration, on the other hand, moves us toward our own values and possibilities. The transformation of this moving paralysis begins with a radical change in perspective. Instead of asking why I don't have what others have, we start asking, what is my life asking me right now? Instead of measuring our value by external achievements, we begin to seek meaning in our unique response to the challenges we face. Frankl used to say that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can always choose our attitude towards what happens to us. and this choice is where our most fundamental freedom resides. The comparison steals us this freedom because it makes us slaves to external expectations. It prevents us from seeing that our life has an intrinsic value that is completely independent of the success or failure of others. Comparison paralysis also feeds on a dangerous illusion that there is a unique, successful model of life, as if there were a universal formula for happiness that everyone should follow. But existential truth is precisely the opposite. Each person carries a unique vocation within himself, a specific call that can only answer. When you constantly compare with others, you are denying your own uniqueness. You are saying that your life has only value if it is an improved copy of someone else's life, and this is a form of violence against its own essence. The exit of this paralysis is not simple, but it is possible. It begins with the recognition that the comparison is a choice. You are not required to measure your life for the lives of others. You can choose a different metric, that of authenticity, personal growth, the impact it has on the world through its own unique way of existing. This change of perspective requires courage. Courage to stop seeking external approval and start developing an internal compass. Courage to accept that your life may not look like anyone else's life, and that this is not just fine, but it is just as it should be. The process of liberating comparison paralysis is some fundamental steps. First, you need to recognize that comparison is an escape mechanism. When you are obsessed with the lives of others, you are avoiding facing your own existential issues, is running away from the responsibility of building a life authentically of yours. Second, you need to develop what Frankl called self-transcendence. Instead of turning inside, obsessed with your inadequacies compared to others, you need to go out for something bigger than yourself. It can be a cause, a relationship, a creative project, something that takes you from the center of your own concerns and connects you with a broader purpose. Third, you need to learn to value your own growth process. Instead of measuring your value for external results, begin to value your effort to become a better person. Progress does not need to be spectacular to be significant. Small, consistent changes have more existential value than great achievements that do not reflect their genuine values. The comparison also feeds on a distorted perception of time. When you compare with others, you are usually comparing your gift with the gift of others, completely ignoring the different journeys that each has traveled. You do not see the years of struggle that preceded the success of others. You do not see the sacrifices made, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt and despair. This temporal distortion creates a toxic impatience with its own journey. You want immediate results, you want to skip steps. You get to the destination without going the way. But authentic growth doesn't work like that. It is a gradual, often invisible process that requires patience and self-pity. At 30 or more, you have lived enough to understand that life is not linear, that the plans rarely unfold as we expect, that success and failure are temporary, but the character we develop when facing both is lasting. Comparison paralysis prevents us from taking advantage of this accumulated wisdom. It keeps us trapped in a teenage mentality, where personal value depends on external approval. But existential maturity invites us to a different perspective, that our life has value regardless of what others think about it. This change of perspective does not happen overnight. It is a daily job of redirecting attention. Instead of focusing on what others are doing, you focus on what you can do. Instead of wondering why you don't have what others have, ask what they can offer the world through their own talents and circumstances. Logotherapy teaches us that meaning cannot be directly persecuted. It emerges as a byproduct of our dedication to something larger than ourselves. When we stop pursuing success alone and began to devote ourselves to causes we consider important, meaning appears naturally. And here is a fundamental truth that comparison obscures. You do not need to be extraordinary to have a significant life. The meaning is not in spectacular achievements, but in the way you respond to the ordinary challenges of existence. It is in kindness that shows a stranger, in the care he has with his family, in his dedication in his work, in the courage he manifests in facing his own weaknesses. Comparison makes us believe that only extraordinary lives have value, but this is a lie that disconnects us from our own dignity. All human life carries within itself a unique potential to contribute to the world, and this contribution need not be publicly recognized to be valuable. Perhaps the most toxic aspect of comparison paralysis is the way it steals the present. When you are constantly measuring your life for the lives of others, you are not really living your own life. It is living an edited, filtered version, distorted by the perspective of others. The gift is where life happens. This is where choices are made, where love is expressed, where growth occurs. But the comparison keeps us perpetually out of the present, always looking to the side, always measuring, always finding reasons for dissatisfaction. The release of this paralysis begins when you choose fully inhabit your own life, when he stops being a tourist in the existence of others and becomes a conscious inhabitant of his own experience. This does not mean completely ignoring others, but means giving priority to their own journey of growth and meaning. This choice requires a fundamental change in the way you define success. Instead of defining success for external achievements, you need to define it for the authenticity with which your values live. Instead of measuring progress compared to others, you measure the distance you have traveled from where you started. The age you have today is a gift. It's not too late to start over, it's not too early to make significant changes. But this gift can only be received when you stop wasting it into comparisons that lead nowhere. The life you are living now is the only one you have. She doesn't have to look like anyone's life to have value. It just needs to be authentically yours. And this authenticity is not something you reach once and for all, but something you choose every moment, every decision, with every answer you give, the challenges you enforce. Comparison paralysis convinces us that we are late for a race we don't even know if we want to compete. But the truth is that there is no race. There is only your unique journey, with your own challenges and possibilities, waiting to be lived with all the conscience and courage you can gather. If these reflections have resonated with something within you, if you recognized in them aspects of your own journey, then you may have come to stop measuring your life by the achievements of others and begin to discover the unique meaning your existence can create. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these existential issues that define our journey of growth and authenticity in adulthood.